Okay.
All right, yes, let's just get started talking about humans. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, so why don't you tell me before we get started what your major is?
Okay, I'm a speech major.
Okay, and which class is this for?
This is for my honors religion is class, so it's like our required Gen Ed Religion 100, and it's a paper about truth within whatever we want it to be. So I chose the Church of Latter-day Saints, aka Mormons, because I think they're really interesting.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit about how this fits into the course generally, and maybe how it fits into what you're studying as well?
Yeah, so this paper is kind of the first of 3 installments throughout the semester. So we do a whole larger paper for our final, which is truth, beauty, and goodness. This is the first part, which is truth, and then we'll do beauty, and then we'll do goodness. So it's kind of like taking a topic that we look at all semester and picking out the specific ideas within it. So this is like truth within the Latter-day Saints, so whatever I believe to be true, I guess, with them.
And why don't you give me a summary of what that is before we read the paper? Just what do you think is true if I walked up and asked you on the street?
Okay, so it's not necessarily what I believe is true, it's what the Mormons believe is true.
I see.
So I kind of centered my whole paper around their articles of faith, which are kind of like their statement of beliefs, almost like a creed. And there's 13 of them, and they kind of go into depth of like what they believe, and a lot of them distinguish them from other Christian religions. And ultimately, through this articles of faith, they kind of determine that they are the one true church, which is a statement that most Christian denominations do not make. So I figured that would be a kind of good starting point for this paper, because most Christian denominations do not have an articles of faith or something even like it. They kind of just use like the 10 Commandments.
Excellent. Okay, so now that I know how it fits into sort of your study and your thinking, why don't we start by setting a couple of goals for this session? Okay. So what are your biggest concerns with your writing generally?
Generally or in this paper?
Let's do generally first.
Okay. I'm a rambler.
Okay.
I tend to get a little off track and say something in 4 sentences that could be said in 1.
Okay. In tutoring or in writing, when we get real technical, we'll call that being concise or concision in your writing.
Okay.
So is that your biggest concern, do you think? Do you have other big writing thoughts?
I think that's it.
Okay, and then what about this paper in particular? What about this assignment?
I feel like I'm not crazy about how this paper is right now. I feel like it's lacking transitions and tying it back to my thesis. I feel like I do tie every paragraph back to my thesis, but it feels very awkward and not like I'm just doing it because I have to, not because it's flowing naturally, kind of.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so typically in my tutoring, I'll try to avoid the word flow or flowing because it's not a word that's super meaningful.
Right.
What I think you're being specific about when you say that is talking about a part of the paper that we call analysis, which is being real deep about how this thing you're saying connects to your argument.
Right, exactly.
And then more specifically how it connects to that judgment you make in your thesis.
Right.
So that's something we'll certainly focus on as we go.
Okay.
The typical structure of a session like this when we have a paper that's already written is we'll read what you've written. Sometimes I'll read all of it depending on the writing, or a student can also read all of it.
Okay.
But for this session, let's trade off back and forth. I'll read 1 paragraph and you read 1 paragraph out loud.
Okay.
I'll make some markings on the page for your lower order issues as far as commas, periods, and things like that go.
Right.
But at the end of each paragraph, let's just take a pause and talk about the bigger ideas and what you think was communicated versus what was actually there.
Sounds good.
Ideally, if we do it right, we'll see where the analysis is lacking or maybe where those transitions are lacking as well.
Okay.
Okay?
Sounds good.
All right, so I'll take the first paragraph. And like I said, I'll make little marks as we go, but let's be thinking in broader ideas.
Okay.
Okay?
Sounds good.
So we have religion in our world today, often seen as a means for understanding life, reveals many important ideas in regards to truth. Many people feel as if their religion, or even religion in general, reveals the ultimate truths about the mysteries of life. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more informally known as the LDS Church or the Mormon Church, though a relatively new denomination of Christianity, accentuates this idea that religion, and their religion specifically, reveals truth. Because of this, the Mormons have many strict beliefs that revolve around things they believe to be true that sometimes go along with other Christian beliefs, and other times distinguish them from other Christian denominations. Like other Christians, the LDS Church believes in the Bible, But the Mormons also believe in an additional 13 belief statements called the Articles of Faith that they follow closely to practice their religion in their daily lives. And I'll just make a small mark for this modifier. Should have been back one word. The Articles of Faith ultimately reveal that the Mormons believe that their sect of Christianity is the true church, and that by believing in and upholding all of the truths within their church, they will get to heaven. Okay, so let's take a step back from this. I think this is really good as far as introductions go. Typically in an introduction, what you're aiming for is to take some broad statement and narrow it down through a series of steps into a thesis. You've done a really good job of doing that. You mentioned that one of your concerns generally was rambling and going off track. I think there's 2 sentences in the middle that could be construed as that way.
Okay.
Specifically this one that starts all the way up with the Church of Jesus Christ and goes all the way down to reveals truth.
Yeah.
With that being said, though, you punctuated it well so that it's very clear, and all of your subjects and verbs align.
Okay.
So it is a long sentence, but it's a grammatically sound sentence.
Okay.
And the same goes for this one. The next one's pretty long, but really well punctuated and really well said.
Okay.
And so while I could see how you would think that that is potentially rambling or potentially off track, I don't think it does that at all.
Okay.
The most important thing for our session, though, will be these 2 lines here. We have the thesis. So this is what we want to make sure we're keeping track of. It looks like our big claim or our big judgment is that this is what the faith ultimately reveals. So we want to keep that in mind. And that our focuses are going to be the idea of believing in, upholding, and getting into heaven. So we have maybe 1, 2, or 3 focuses, depending on how you want to think about it.
Right.
But you mentioned at the beginning of the session that getting back to that thesis and doing your analysis was a big concern. We have the judgment and those focuses now, so let's just keep that in the back of our mind as we go.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So with that, why don't I have you read the next paragraph?
It's
And again, I'll stop you if I see anything small. If not, we'll just talk about it once we get to the end.
Okay. The first article of the Articles of Faith centers around believing in the Trinity, made up of God the Father, Jesus his Son, and the Holy Spirit. All sects of Christianity, not just the LDS Church, believe in this as one of their major truths. The fact that Joseph Smith, the founder of the LDS Church and the writer of the Articles of Faith, chose to put their belief in the Holy Trinity first highlights the importance of this truth within their religion. It emphasizes that above all else, the Mormons believe in the incarnation of Jesus Christ, and only through this belief can the rest of the truths be realized.
Okay, since that was a short one, why don't you keep going?
Okay. The second article of faith, more specific than the first, states that Mormons believe that humans on earth are punished for their own sins, not for the sinful acts caused by Adam. This makes reference to Adam's original sin in the book of Genesis in the Bible. However, other denominations of Christianity do not emphasize this point as much. While other forms of Christianity focus on the fact that humans are born tainted because of Adam and Eve's original sin, the LDS Church says they don't believe that. This second article alludes to the fact that no matter what happened in the past with Adam, humans will not be punished for acts that are not their own. This can be applied to many other aspects of life. Children will not be punished by the sinful acts of their parents, siblings, or anyone else they know. At the end of the day, Mormons believe in the truth that they will be judged by God for their actions and their actions alone.
Okay, excellent. Let me point out just one small thing. In this first list that you had here, made up of God the Father, Jesus his Son, and the Holy Spirit, typically when we have a list that includes commas and words that repeat, they're called appositives.
Okay.
And typically we would do semicolons in between those items in a list.
Okay.
So God the Father, Jesus his Son, and then the Holy Spirit, to show that that's not 5 items, it's still only 3. Although that might seem self-evident in this case, it's usually something we do.
Right.
Here's where I think you were right in what you said at the beginning. This idea of upholding the thesis and getting back often to analyzing it. So we had this idea that the Articles of Faith ultimately reveal this big thing about their sect of Christianity, right?
Yeah.
Okay, where do we get back to that in this paragraph? This one seems sort of introductory as well, but what am I supposed to take from the sinful act of the parents and original sin as far as their ultimate truth goes?
The idea is that it's the truths that make up the Articles of Faith that reveal the ultimate truth of all of it together. So I kind of tried to point out the truth within each one and then tie it back at the end. Maybe that's not so clear.
Yeah, the issue with waiting to the very end of the paper for your analysis is typically that at points along the way, your reader can lose track of what the big project was or why they're having all of these articles broken down.
Right.
And so if that's the case, I think at least once every 2 paragraphs or so, the end of this paragraph should refer back to that big idea from the thesis.
Right.
Being that this has to do with ultimate truth or ultimate revelation. Okay? And so, like I said, we don't have to sort of keep going through this paper. I think we can kind of break now
Right.
and go over into talking about if we met all of your concerns in this tutoring session.
Okay.
Do you just want to jump to that?
Sure.
Okay, excellent. So let's just pretend we read all this, cut this out, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so in this session we looked primarily at areas where you were rambling or off track. We looked at transition areas and analysis, and I marked up some of the lower order issues on your paper.
Right.
Would you say that we met all of the objectives you had in this session?
Yeah. Yeah, I was concerned kind of just about transitions and stuff like that, and I feel like now I kind of know where I messed up and where I can start.
Okay, and how do you think we made your paper better by touching up these areas or looking at these areas?
I feel like I have more of an understanding as a whole of where I'm supposed to go, like, using my thesis, and, like, how that can be tied into every paragraph.
Okay, and how do you think you're going to do that? What's, like, your plan? And let's write that down. We'll call that your action plan.
Okay, I feel like I need to kind of take a look at every paragraph and, like, take a look at my thesis and kind of use these ideas of, like, believing in and upholding and getting to heaven. I don't talk as much as I should about getting into heaven and, like, how these truths will assist in doing that. And I feel like I need to tie it back to, like, every day what happens with their beliefs and how that can really pertain to ultimately what they're trying to achieve with their religion.
Yeah, for sure. And where do you think you're going to do that in your paragraphs? Do you think you could maybe point to a place?
I feel like it would probably make the most sense at the end, like after I kind of explain the actual article and then kind of using the bigger picture to tie it back. It makes more sense than doing it at the beginning.
For sure. I think that's a great idea. In addition to that, do you think you would return to the tutoring center for more assistance with this paper, or is it something you feel comfortable doing on your own?
I feel like, yeah, if I have the time, like, I can definitely come back and take a look at the things that I adjusted, or even after I get feedback from my professor. But yeah, definitely.
Excellent. I think that'd be a good idea. We can also touch up the lower order problems we see
For sure.
in those new things you write.
Yeah.
So let's call it a day there.
Okay.
This will be your action plan, and you can take it
Okay.
with you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.